Well, hello everybody. Good morning to everybody in the States. Good afternoon to people in the UK and Europe, and good evening to anyone on the subcontinent, or I guess it's well into the evening if it's Australia, let's say. Um, we may well have a few guests today because we invited quite a few people. I'm Christopher Norris from 12 Ronnies, and I'm here today with Bill Murray. Um, who's also from 12 Ronnies. Um, and we're going to pick up our conversation from last week about life after death, how to bounce back from startup failure. But I do have a quick admin thing to say right at the beginning. Um, just, if you're on YouTube, please like the video, please share it with your networks and click the bell to get notifications. Likewise with LinkedIn, if you can sort of say that you like it and maybe put comments in the underneath the video, and likewise with Facebook, because the more engagement we get, the better it is. The more people get to hear about these shows. So, and one last thing is, if you want to engage with Bill and I, then there is the link to click, and I've put that link in the comments on all of the three platforms that we're live streaming to. So if you just simply click on that link, then you'll be able to join Bill and I to ask your question. So, welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Just as a quick recap, last time we spoke quite a lot on the subjects of, oops, I'm just trying to bring it up, on personal and emotional resilience and learning from failure. So, as you weren't on the call last week, is there anything that you'd like to bring your own perspective to on those subjects?
Yeah, I love the subject of bouncing back from startup failure, and I don't think we talk enough about failure, at least not enough in the right way. I mean, we'll talk about failure as far as maybe ridiculing someone who fails, but the right kind of failure conversation is something I think is really missing. And the analogy I use in startup failure is you can't avoid failure in a startup, but you can avoid a colossal one. And for instance, think of in terms of a heart attack. How do you avoid a heart attack, or how do you come back from a heart attack? Well, in a lot of cases, you don't come back from a heart attack. So you enable a strategy that says, hey, how do I avoid one? And so when you're diagnosed with heart disease, you stay close to your doctor, you take your medications, you eat the right foods, you do the right exercise, you do everything that you need to do to avoid one, so that you can live a normal life and you can go on and keep doing the things you like to do. And the same thing is in a startup. Don't have a heart attack at your startup. Don't invest $50,000 of your own money on a product that you haven't validated with a customer, then fail, as you will in that case, and then never be able to do something amazing again. So the point is don't have a heart attack in your startup. Validate your products. If nobody wants it, great, move on to the next idea successfully. But if you have a heart attack, you're not going to be able to come back, or maybe years or even decades before you can raise the capital again to do something like that. So that's kind of how I share it with people. It's a little bit like that.
Oh, that's an interesting analogy. That's thank you. Well, maybe leading on from that, we can pick up with the new sections for today's session. So, I mean, how would you sort of come back in terms of a financial recovery if you have launched something and it's not worked? What would be the steps, do you think?
Well, have the discipline to not to throw good money after bad. When you've made a bad investment, don't double down on it. And I'm in Las Vegas right now, so I'm using poker or blackjack analogies. But don't double down on your bet. When if nobody's buying, they're not going to start buying next week if you don't change something. So stop trying to do the same things and expecting a different result. Other than that, if you have debts, that sort of thing, get those debts taken care of first before you do your next thing, because you're gonna have a hard time finding a loan, and you're gonna have a hard time doing the things you need to do if you're concerned about debt while you're trying to validate a product. attract customers, that sort of thing. You want to have a clear mind so that you can be singly focused on your outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I just add to that if you do find that you've got creditors when your business fails, then the best thing you can do is keep talking to your creditors, because they're human beings. They realize that you've tried your best to make your startup work, and offer to pay a small amount of money every month, let's say, until you get back on your feet. And as you get back on your feet, you'll be able to increase the amounts every month that you pay them. So, I mean, I've had that experience. I had some credit card debt once after a failure of a startup, and I with some of the cards, I was just paying back £1 a month, to start with, but that was enough because it kept the conversation going.
Yeah, that's a great point. The famous story of Airbnb is that the founders maxed out their $50,000 worth of credit cards, and they couldn't do anything else. They couldn't keep moving forward, so they actually had to take a step back and sell commemorative cereal from the 2008-2012 election, Obama O's and Captain McCain cereal. They sold, I don't know, 500 boxes of each, and were able to wipe out their credit card debt, and then were able to get back to things like Airbnb. It's a great story.
Was that before they realized that they were in the business of renting rooms? Because before it was, they were in a different business, weren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're still at the beginning. They're still validating things. They had expenses of trying to build the basic platform, and those expenses added up very quickly, and they found themselves they had no cash flow, so they had to come up with something, and so they kind of went off the board and said, well, how could we make a couple of bucks here? And they were wildly successful. And I guess we're all lucky they didn't stay in the cereal business, because I'm a big proponent of Airbnb and Vrbo.
So, I mean, what's the fallout like between co-founders, for example, in a failed startup as well, and especially if there's kind of financial, weakness or kind of vulnerability?
Yeah, money's a great way to end relationships, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, unless you have a plan, unless you can, again, this is a Netflix analogy. Netflix is really great at handling problems as they come up because they've already thought about the problems that could come up ahead of time, and they already had a solution to it. Famously, when what's his name from House of Cards, Kevin Spacey or whatever, got in some trouble, and I think that story has evolved a bit since. But back then, he got in some trouble. Well, Netflix already had a conversation. Well, what happens if an actor in a series of this magnitude gets in trouble? What are we going to do? And they had decided years before what the procedure was going to be, and they executed on it without delay. So there was none of this nonsense in the media where maybe they will, maybe they won't, and they just did it. They cut it off, and that was it. So it's have those conversations ahead of time. Okay, what happens if we get in debt? What happens if one of us wants to leave? What happens if we want to bring in somebody else and the other person doesn't like that person? You need to go through as many of those contingencies as possible, have them all in writing, agree to them, so that then it doesn't become, you don't have to make a decision at a tough emotional time. The decision was made back here when there were no emotions. We're just going through it logically, and we were planning.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. There's a new film that's just come out in America. Well, probably everywhere, but it's an American film. It's called War Game. I don't know if you've heard of this. And essentially, what the filmmakers did, it's a documentary, but they invited lots of stakeholders, like in the American government, and chief of staff and defense secretaries and all those kinds of people, generals, to play out on camera what would happen if somebody tried to steal an election. And essentially the outcome was that it's possible.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that's I know it's a bit scary, but it's an interesting insight into how these war game type things work.
Yeah, and I don't think governments do a good job of planning for contingencies. I mean, it helps anyone, even for a family. Hey, planning for a financial loss or an illness or something. What are we going to do? I mean, anytime you can plan for these things ahead of time and then simply put the plan into action, then it takes the emotion out of it. And you can keep moving instead of it stalling you, it's stopping you, and potentially destroying a relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at history, it's a little known fact, a bit of a segue. But in the 1930s, in the 1920s and 30s, um, there's often conflict between an empire that's declining and a newly rising empire.
Sure.
And in the 1920s and 30s, the British Empire was going downhill, and the American, superpower type status was coming up. And there was actually a wargaming exercise done in the 1920s in America because they were playing out the situation where they'd have to go to war with Britain.
Wow.
And they played the whole thing out, including kind of invading Canada and all these kind of things. And
I won't make a comment about that.
No. Well, and the outcome was that it would be a very destructive stalemate.
Yeah.
So the generals and everybody that was doing the war game decided that actually it would be a good idea not to go to war with Britain because it wouldn't get anywhere.
Well, that's a great example of the benefits of that kind of planning. If we did more of it, if everyone did more of it, we'd be in a much better situation for all of us, I think.
Okay, so if you've got investors and your business fails, what's your take on, is that money lost completely, or do you have an obligation to pay those people back?
Well, again, it gets back to what the legal agreements were. If you sold them, if you were selling them a piece of the business, if this was venture capital, there have to be agreements in place to say, okay, when the business is ended, what happens to it? Does the intellectual property go over to the investors? Do they get to sell it off? What is it, and how much liability is with the founders? Hopefully not very much, but so again, that all has to be handled ahead of time so that so people don't send guys after you with clubs.
So let's say things have been resolved, or maybe they haven't. I mean, when's the right time to think about doing your next startup, or at least having an idea and then working on that?
Yeah, as soon as the opportunity comes up, you and I were talking before the program today that I was at a pitch competition yesterday, and one of the fellows for one of the startups was fresh off a startup last year. He'd been in the same pitch competition for a different startup. Well, that one I think had either disbanded or they had or they had they'd sold out or whatever it was, and now or he just moved on from it. He likes the early stage portion of it. So it's whenever you're ready for it. Ready is time, it's money, it's abilities, it's co-founders. So it's that combination of things. The time is right to start the next thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And was the second pitch reasonable, or do you think he'll be back next year?
All the pitches except for one were terrible yesterday. I don't know. I don't know who coached them. The one pitch that was excellent won the competition. I'm glad she did. She did just great. I mean, she's just $1 million. But everybody else, I walked away saying, what exactly do they do, and why is it important? I mean, if you don't tell me who your customer is and what their problem is, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to care about your solution. So
do you think they've been through that? Do you think they've been through that exercise, or?
I don't know. I don't think they'd been coached very well. I think they thought, well, we're just going to go up and talk about what we do. That's not a pitch. That's a conversation. And a pitch is about bringing out emotions in the people that you're pitching to, so that they want to do something as a result of your pitch, like invest.
So
buy.
Let's say you've had a bad experience with a startup failure. What kind of personal care should you take, and should there be a gap between you going and doing something else to recover, or is the best way to recover simply start doing something immediately?
Get involved in the startup community. That's the best way. In the Silicon Valley, you're actually not. You don't have any credibility until you've actually failed somewhere, once, twice, three times. And you're on your fourth try. So depending on and that's culture. So immerse yourself in a culture that doesn't ridicule you for failure. Immerse yourself in a culture that allows you to turn failure into fertilizer. for the next thing. Hey, I learned all these amazing things, and now I'm going to leverage that into my next thing. And I'm just looking for the people that that want to join me. So now, if you had the heart attack, nobody might want to, in your startup, maybe nobody will want to be around you because you did it wrong. You went out and did something that you shouldn't have done. But failing the right way is probably a good thing to do, especially in those sort of cultures.
No, that's interesting. Especially if you have the right attitude and you just wear the badges with honor, if you like, as learning experiences, then I guess that kind of moves us on to the next section, really, about sort of managing the process of the next thing. Because as you say, having had experience of launching things and it not working, in theory, as long as you learn from your mistakes, then you'll be better off next time round, won't you?
Yeah, again, it comes down to being very intentional about it. Just like we're intentional about potential future decisions we have to make. Let's be intentional about the lessons we've learned. We learn this. Next time we're going to do that. That having that stuff down, writing it down, committing it to memory. And then making sure you don't make the same mistakes again is really important, because you may have made those mistakes in an emotional moment because you didn't know the right direction to go. Well, now you do, so there's no excuse this time. And sharing that with your new co-founders and having them share their similar experiences, from their losses, their mistakes, their failures. A great startup should be the sum of all the failures of the people involved. And that sum should be a positive number, not a negative one.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you think it's a good idea, especially if you've failed, to maybe, take on get into a mentoring relationship with someone, or maybe a coaching thing?
Absolutely.
Try and learn. Yeah,
absolutely. It's always great to have that kind of unbiased third party bounce your ideas off them. Say, I think I learned this. I think I did this wrong. I think I did this, on emotion instead of logic, and just get that feedback and then get those stories from the mentor. I mean, a great mentor is going to tell you a lot of stories. I mean, I've already told 2 or 3 stories in our time together here. They're going to tell you stories about other people who've done similar things and had similar experiences. Build all that up, and again, make your next venture be the sum of all that. I guess, Chris, for you, what's the culture in the UK like around failure like that? I mean, is it similar to the Silicon Valley thing, or are there things deep seated in your culture that might help that or hinder that, or what is the culture of failure like on your side of the Atlantic?
I think it depends what sector you're in. I think if you're in the tech sector, it's probably the same all over the world.
Okay,
but as a kind of stereotype and as a generality, I think the States is much more tolerant of failure. It may be something to do with the cultural thing of people wanting to be proved right and having. It can be quite a difficult thing, as we were talking last week about getting too emotionally involved with your idea. And I think in the States, you're better at kind of just having an idea and just saying, okay, well, this is the idea. It's not part of, it's part of, for the time that it's alive, I will give it my best shot, but it's
right.
Not what I place my complete identity on. And I think that there can be a feeling that you get too emotionally involved with something over here, because we're not sort of culturally. I mean, it's said, the cliche is that Britain is a nation of shopkeepers. Well, I mean, how true that is, I don't know, but we sell things, but we're not necessarily entrepreneurs. So it's a new thing, and I do think that it's a growing sector, sure. And I think people are getting more used to the idea of kind of an American style culture around startups. And that's part of what 12 Ronnies and founders and mentors and all these other tools that we've got is there to do, is to support people and to teach them that it's okay if something fails, but also try and teach people how not to fail in the first place,
or how not to fail so badly, or how to fail quickly, inexpensively, Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So in terms of, I mean, there's no guarantee that if you launch something new, that if you just launch it, that it's going to be more resilient, or if it's going to have a better business model. You've got to actually go out and test things, haven't you?
Yeah,
But
every one of them is unique. A business model is always a brand new creation, at least if it's a disruptive one. So you got to go out and test it, and you may go through 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 tries before you actually get something that's sustainable and profitable.
so what's your handle on all this testing and verifying and whatever? Maybe you can give us a bit of a distillation about your view about data, especially sales data, when it comes to the pre-launch space.
Yeah, so your first customers are always going to be early adopters. So remembering that that's who you're dealing with. You're not dealing with the majority of the people. You're dealing on a very narrow, targeted set of people with that have a problem. They know they've got the problem, and they've probably got the purest version of it. So, but understanding why they buy will be important to building the product for other people as you go through the adoption curve. The early majority, late majority, so on. So that sales day, you want to understand who's buying and why. Don't just get excited. I think some people get excited when somebody buys something. All right, they bought something. We made some money. I don't care about the money. Why did you buy? What are you hiring my product to do? And how is it? And then how did it work? Did it actually do that for you? The thing that you were hoping it would do. You're getting repeat sales. And then are you building the engine of growth? The engine of growth is promoters, because you can't afford. Nobody can market their way to success because marketing is really expensive, and the cost customer acquisition was cost of customer acquisition is high, even today in the digital age. So understanding not only satisfaction piece from your customer, but the passion piece, because when they're passionate, they'll get online and say everybody else has to buy that, and that's when you actually cross the chasm from early adopter to early majority, because the early majority won't buy your product right away, but they will buy it once they see a lot of Google reviews that are 5 stars.
Yeah, that's true.
So dig into that data, go talk to people. It may sound dumb to ask somebody this, why did you buy my product today? And ask them right away while the emotion's still there. Oh, I saw it and I loved it. It was great, and I really wanted to try it out. And I needed it right now. Because you may learn other things. Like if I needed it right now, well then, okay, we need an overnight shipping option, or we need, immediate download option or something like that. Understanding that moment of purchase, making sure that it's great, we'll get that passionate customer who then will help you build the engine of growth.
Yeah, it's interesting when it comes to reviews, and I'm sure we'll have a session on this at some later point. But it's actually good for authenticity if you've got a few 1-star reviews, because it proves that you're not, you're not being a sock puppet.
I think you're right. I guess in one of my side hustles, I took a great deal of pride that I had 100 consecutive 5-star reviews before I got my first 4-star review. But to this day, I don't have any 1-star reviews. And actually, I manage that. I don't even, when I ask people to review my site, I use a 2-step process where I say, hey, give me how many stars and, tell me what you liked about it. But I do that on my site, not on Google. And if it's 5 stars, then I actually go to a landing page that says, great, could you share this on Google? But I don't let anybody, I don't encourage anybody else to share it. So I may be hurting myself in some ways there.
No. It's fine. It's just that the occasional.
But you're right. You can't please everybody.
No, and the occasional bad review. Often, you get a 1-star review because the customer's completely misunderstood what's on offer.
Yeah,
so that can be useful feedback.
Well, and the nice thing is that Google allows you to respond, so that gives you a chance in that moment to respond to the 1-star review. Mary, I'm so sorry that you were dissatisfied with the product. I'm going to refund your money right away, and I'd love to call you and find out how I can make this right. My company is committed to, this is where you get the opportunity to demonstrate your brand, even when it's not sunny sunny and warm.
Your fiercest critics, if you deal with their issue, then they become your greatest advocates, don't they? So
they do. When my kids were little, I was always trying to teach them business stuff, and I told them the story of the time my pizza was an hour late from the pizza delivery company, and I opened the door, and before I could even share my displeasure, the pizza delivery guys said, "Sorry so much for the delay. The pizza's free, and here's a couple of free drinks for you too." And I asked my kids, I said, how do you think I felt after that? He said, and then the kids both said, "You probably want them to be late next time too." I said, "Exactly." I was unhappy anymore.
And cold pizza is actually okay, isn't it? So
I can warm up the pizza in the oven, and I got
exactly. We've all got microwaves. Yeah, exactly.
What can I do next time to delay him? To delay him too. So those moments, people see that, and you said authenticity. That's a great word here, because then you become authentic in that moment.
Right. That's given me an idea for another session, perhaps next time.
That's great.
So in terms of risk management, to stop you failing another time, what kind of steps would you, maybe we'll finish on this and then just do some wrap up afterwards. And also, if you have any other comments that you'd like to put in the feed, or questions that you've got, please do ask them, and we'll see them. We've had one comment which I'll show you, Bill, if you can't see it, but from probably Julie, I imagine, at Innovation World, saying that it was a great story. So getting back to risk management, Bill, what things would you put in place to make sure that you don't come a cropper the next time you try and launch something?
Yeah, so we're back to the heart attack again. So it's pay close attention to your doctor and what you've been told to do. Take your prescriptions and buy all that. I mean, be intentional. It's exciting and fun to be in a startup or starting up a new company or trying something new, starting a business. But be intentional about everything. Be intentional about the lessons you've learned from other situations, and the lessons that other companies have taught you as you've gone out and seen what other people have done, successes and failures. Be intentional in planning for contingencies. All these things we've talked about in the 30 minutes here. Be really intentional, and that may sound boring, or that may sound like it's gonna kill your momentum, but it's a small investment you make now to avoid a big momentum stop later on when something does come up. Oh gosh, now what do we have to do? We ran out of money. What do we do? Well, if we talked about this 6 months ago, we would have known what to do at this point, and we wouldn't be worried about it. We'd still be working instead of stopping and figuring out what to do for money. Like happened with the Airbnb guys. Now they still turned out great, but if the breakfast cereal hadn't gone well, we might not have that company.
I guess they believed in. They still had the vision, didn't
they? They did.
And I guess that's part of resilience, isn't it? To find ways of staying alive.
Yeah, that's the old scrappy, not crappy. So they got scrappy, and they were successful and allowed them to keep going. But had they had the conversation about, okay, what happens when we max out the credit cards? Well, here's plan B. Here's where we can get some money. Here's a line of credit, perhaps, that they already had ready. We're not going to take it now because we don't want to get in that kind of debt, but we can have it in 24 hours if it comes up, and then we don't have to stop and take 2 weeks or a month off to sell breakfast cereal potentially.
Well, maybe that's worth thinking about at the beginning when you're launching again, to have some kind of contingency plan like that in place, so that if things do go badly, because what you really don't want to do is lose the passion.
Don't lose the momentum
for launching something. Don't feel so burnt that you're sort of timid.
Yeah. Don't lose that momentum. Don't become gun shy. You have these things planned ahead of time. And you can't ever plan out a startup or a new business because everything's going to change every day. But you can have a high level plan that includes these contingencies and processes and decisions that are already made, so that you don't have to lose that momentum to make those decisions and come up with the contingencies later on.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. Well, thank you. If anybody's got any further questions, You know, we're at the end of our chat today, but please do leave any comments or questions in the comments, and we can always pick them up after the event. You'll see a recording of this video immediately of the whole thing at LinkedIn, at Facebook, and at YouTube. And sometime in the next few days, you'll see we'll be starting to drip out video clips of shorter excerpts from the event. So you know, if there's something in particular that you want an answer to, then you'll be able to find that. Especially at YouTube, that's probably a good place to see the clips. So just to say, as I say, if you've enjoyed today's conversation or you found it helpful, do click on the like button, do share it around your networks, click on the notification bell so you know that we're coming up next time. It's every Wednesday for this 12 Ronnies event. We do have ad hoc events too. There'll be more of those coming up, and we'll tell you when those are happening. Yeah, tell everybody you know about it, because 12 Ronnies is all about helping people launch businesses, and the more people get to hear about that, the more people we can help. So thank you very much, Bill. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion, or?
You know, fail as well as you can, and concentrate on failing well, and you'll be successful at some point. You can't fail forever if you're failing the right way.
What's the Silicon Valley thing about failing fast, isn't it? So
absolutely, fail fast, fail cheap, and and document everything so you don't do it. So you don't make the same mistakes again. That's all you can ask for.
All right, that's brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Thank you in advance to anybody that's watching this on a video clip. So, and we'll see you again next time. So, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris.